UK's News of the World phone hacking scandal has put the practice and business of news under the global spotlight, not least because it puts Rupert Murdoch's very powerful media organisation, News Corp, under the scanner. Some of the ethical questions that have been raised are ones that world-over news companies grapple with regularly. Where will we find the new rules of the media game and who will take the lead in finding them? Let's ask my guests. Please welcome from London, Meghnad Desai, member of the House of Lords and political and social commentator, Gurbir Singh, senior business journalist, Margaret Heffernen, a veteran media professional, businesswoman, author of a book called Willful Blindness, and Indrajit Gupta, the editor of Forbes India. It's good to have all of you on the show. Meghnad Desai, let me come to you directly. You have a ringside view of the proceedings. Tell me, what is it that you're struck by most in what has happened? Is it the proximity of the establishment to the media, in this case, News International?
I think there's been a lot of proximity between media and politicians, and not just the Murdoch empire, although Murdoch empire was the most influential, but other newspapers like the Daily Mail constantly see the prime ministers invite those editors in. And the idea of the politicians is that newspapers have enormous influence on how the agenda is shaped day after day on policy, on parliamentary debates and so on. Some people say they exaggerate the influence newspapers have, but Tony Blair, for example, was in no doubt that if he had not made his peace with Rupert Murdoch, he would have had difficulty getting elected.
Is this peculiar to UK and the newspaper business, and the fact that between Mr. Murdoch's newspapers, he reaches out to more than double what other newspapers reach out to in terms of readers in the UK?
I think that being a small, compact country, very centralized, newspapers, which are sort of London-based newspapers, there are about 10 newspapers, have much greater influence in British politics than, for example, in America, because in America it's a very big country and there are very few newspapers which really command national attention. And so in UK politics, newspapers are much more dominant than they are in other countries. And so this is what gives, or rather the politicians believe, that newspapers have power. And if newspapers behave in a criminal way, the contagion falls on the politicians as well. That is, our crisis currently is that what newspapers did, which was over the boundary of criminality, has now infected both the politicians and the police. And because it affected the police as well, we have a serious crisis on our hands.
Right. Let me get Margaret in at this point. Margaret Heffernen, you've authored this book, Willful Blindness. That was a question one of the MPs grilling the Murdochs, in that select committee put to the Murdochs. And James Murdoch was completely taken aback. It was like he had not heard of it. You make a very strong case for that, where this particular case is concerned, isn't it?
Well, I think, yes, I think, clearly the News Corporation has been willfully blind to much that was going on inside of it. But I think, it's in the nature of willful blindness that people suddenly shocked when things aren't going their way look back, and there's a very long and very visible trail of evidence. So I think, really what I'm shocked by here is that everyone's so shocked, because what News Corporation stood for, what it believed in, has been clear for a very, very long time. In some ways, what's most surprising about this whole episode is that everyone finally gathered up their courage, to start asking some more searching questions. But I think the other thing that's truly surprising about it is that one reason Rupert Murdoch has been so successful over the years is because he used to have a very good intuitive sense of what the public wanted and what they would stand for. And somehow over the years, I would say that has deserted him. He failed to pick up on the revulsion against political elites that has characterized the last few years, and he failed to pick up the real discomfort around global takeovers of British companies. And those are both uncharacteristic and very big blunders to see Rupert Murdoch making.
We also heard his son, we heard his top executive, Rebecca Brooks, talk about this case. Would you say that in this case, it's because of, you know, the hubris or arrogance of success? Is it negligence, or is it actual complicity? I was shocked when I heard the police, you know, both the Met chiefs, the commissioner and the assistant commissioner deposed before another select committee of the British Parliament, and there are some 10 people from international newspapers or from that group who are today working with the Public Affairs Department. It's shocking, isn't it?
It is shocking, and it definitely is hubris, but I think it's something else, which is that in the last decade or so, there's been a real love affair between business and complexity. And the danger of these very, very big, complex, highly attenuated global businesses is that they become stretched out over such distances, over so many different people touching different parts of the businesses, that everyone kind of loses sight of how those pieces connect up. You know, the division of labor required to run a company of this scale is such that whoever initiates something is bound not to be the person who concludes it. And very often along the way, ethics, sense of responsibility, what the meaning of events might be, gets completely lost. You know, we've seen this in the complexity in the banking scandals. It's not that different inside of News Corporation. And anytime you look at real ethical failure, you know, whether you're looking frankly at the Holocaust, the banking collapse, or News Corporation, they all operate the same way, which is that big effects are achieved by thousands of people taking tiny steps in the wrong direction.
Indrajit, you've been listening very keenly to what Margaret is saying. We always tend to put media empires under scrutiny. At the end of the day, it's just like any other business, and yet critically, it's not and cannot afford to be like any other business, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, it's a difficult balance for most part, partly because I think the independence that we crave for as journalists, or the society in some ways craves for, is very difficult to actually make it work in reality, as we've seen in this particular case, because there's that cozy relationship that clearly exists when politicians want to influence media and media wants a preferential treatment really meted out, access. It's much the same with the Corps as well. Also, I think the other big issue is that the print business model is under pressure. And this is really a great occasion when the chips are down for politicians to assert themselves, because frankly, if you see what's going on in India as well, politicians are under pressure. What better way to bounce back and hit back at media when the chips are down? And you know that because of intense competition, the print business model with declining revenues and circulation is under pressure as well in the West.
Right. In fact, Rupert Murdoch, if you look at his annual statement and if you look at some of the moves he's made, from creating paywalls online for all his media, from Wall Street Journal, for other media publications, to introducing the first iPad newspaper earlier this year. Meghnad Desai, what do you make of the kind of reputational damage that News Corp papers or News International papers have suffered in the UK and globally as a result of this fiasco?
No, I think closing down News of the World was a very shrewd and bold step, because that way, what was really toxic in the empire represented, while a profitable newspaper, only 1% of total revenue. So in a sense, what he was trying to do is trying to insulate Times and the Sunday Times and the Sun from the contagion of News of the World. That way he's proved very decisive. But also, Rupert Murdoch was the first person, as Indrajit Gupta said, to go online and try to see if he could make money from having newspaper available online. When he started that, there were very many skeptics, but now it has become business practice. The economics of the newspaper industry is very much in flux right now.
14.5 million people in the UK read one or the other of Murdoch's papers. Why do you think suddenly these same tabloid readers have protested so much with what is happening?
The sense I've got from reading the UK press is that hacking and privacy violations, illegal privacy violations, were sort of condoned or winked at where it concerned celebrities actors, to some degree politicians also.
Because they were fair game.
They were fair game, people sort of join in the laughter or whatever else. But when it crossed the boundaries of celebrities and went into ordinary people's lives, not just ordinary people, but people who had suffered, people who had been killed. You get into a phone of a person and you cause distress to the family of a dead child. You see, that really crossed the limits, and then the public realized that nothing was safe.
Margaret Heffernen, if I can come to you with the next question, and that is, you know, willful blindness. Do you think readers and consumers are also culpable in that sense? Do we, you know, because like I was saying, 14.5 million people read one or the other of the Murdoch papers in the UK. And that's more than double the competitors.
We become blind when we cling together within communities of like-minded people and we don't expose ourselves to challenging thinking. And what you see very characteristically in the UK media market is that people buy all the media that they agree with and they shun the media that they don't agree with. And what that means is that you have a fantastic echo chamber, but what you don't have is a really rich level of debate. And I think what we've seen in the last week or so, you know, which has been quite interesting, is a hugely increased and enriched topic of debate and discussion about what we need from our media, how it ought to function, and its absolutely critical role, not just in the economy, where it's important, but in a democracy where it's essential. And I think we need to find ways to get beyond the echo chamber that has heretofore truly characterized British media.
All right, I'll take a break on that note. Hang in there, please, guests. We'll come back. Coming up on the other side, a judicial inquiry has been instituted into this scandal. Former editors have been arrested. Will this media scandal result in greater controls on media or better, more effective self-regulation? We'll be back in just a bit.